Let's talk about Google. In fact, we don't even use this term called search. We always say, let's Google it. Google is so important, right? Now, the only thing Google does is indexes all the pages on the internet, not all the pages, but then the pages which are there for the indexing. Now, why do we need Google? Example, let's say if I want to search something on the internet, let's say I want to download a JDK version. Since I'm working on Java projects, let's say I want to download JDK. Now, in that case, I will just go to Google and I will search for JDK download. Now, of course, Google is not having JDK download, right? In fact, JDK software. The software is available on some other website, not one, multiple website. One of it is Oracle. So basically, it uses some algorithms to give you best results, and then it tries to give you all the result on the first page itself, and that's why we don't even go to the second page, right? In fact, it's been a long time I've even clicked on this to button here. Basically, you get everything what you wanted on the first page. If you don't get it, we change our query, right? So the idea is Google helps you to collect all the data from the internet. Now, the thing is, Google is working in Web 2.0. So basically, the world which we are living now is a world where everything is centralized. So the services provided by this company is a centralized service. Example, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all provide a centralized service. We want to move towards the decentralized internet, and that is possible with the help of blockchain. So basically, we are saying, hey, instead of using a central service, let's use a decentralized internet. So basically, instead of having data on one server, we can have data on multiple servers. And these machines, basically, we call them as nodes, right? This is basically, I'm trying to create a blockchain network. And example of this type of networks is, let's say you might have heard about Bitcoin network. Maybe you have heard about Ethereum network. And one of my favorite is Polkadot. Now, these are all the networks which we have, right? Now, what type of data you store here? So example, in the world of Web 2.0, so you try to store your data in a database. It can be a structured, unstructured, I mean SQL, NoSQL databases. But let's say if we talk about the blockchain, how do you store data? So basically you store your data in a block. So you store your data in these blocks. Now it will be multiple blocks, and all these blocks are created after a particular time. Now, based on which network I'm talking about, Bitcoin will have a different timeline. Ethereum, Polkadot, every network here will have a different time for this new block creation. Example, Bitcoin takes approximately 10 minutes for one block. Now, whenever you have this block, and all these blocks are basically chained, right? So these blocks are chained, and that's why we call them as blockchain, right? Because these are chained. In fact, the earlier term for this was chain of blocks, but blockchain looks good, right? So what's the advantage of using blockchain here? So whenever you store data in a blockchain, it gives you one thing, which is immutability, right? So all your data is immutable. So once you store your data there, no one can change it. And that's what build trust. So one of the things which we are missing in this world is trust, right? And we can achieve that with the help of blockchain again. I guess my image is hiding another block here, which is here. Ignore that. So basically you can have multiple blocks, right? And all this block will have a number. Now, the first block, we normally call it as a Genesis block, right? And the last block is currently created. So the block which is mentioned here is actually just created, which is hiding behind me. You can see that's a block I'm talking about, right? It's there. The block is there. So that sounds good, right? Blockchain is great. It's immutable and it is decentralized. So all these nodes are not centralized nodes. They are decentralized nodes. Now, the only problem here we have is every network will have a different blockchain, and this blockchain will not have one or two blocks. Let me just show you how many blocks we can have. So to explain that, what I will do is I will take you to this Ethereum Explorer, and if you click on the first link, since we are using Google, it will give you the perfect result, and see the number of blocks. So the block number I'm talking about is this here. It's around 14 million block number we have. So the current block, which is created 1 minute ago, is 14 million. Now the crazy part is, if you want to search something in these blocks, so the image which I've drawn earlier, was having only 4 blocks. We're talking about 14 million block. How will you search your data in this block? Of course, this block will have transaction, right? How will you store your data? And that is a tricky part. Now, if you want to search the data, it will take huge amount of time. So basically, we have to do indexing. So we have to search something like Google for the blockchain, and that's where we have, in fact, before that, I have to show you one more thing. which is Polkadot. So if I go to Polkadot Explorer and if I click on this one, you can see the number of blocks we have there. We have approximately, this is the block, latest block which I'm talking about. And it creates block in every minute, I guess. Every minute we have 2 to 3 blocks. We can see the number later. But see the number of blocks here. How will you search your data in this thing? And for that, we have a solution. So what's the solution? This, my friend, this is the solution, the subquery network. So basically using subquery, you can index everything. Now the question is why we have to index? See, the problem is as a developer or maybe as a consumer, let's say we have a user here and this user want to access a web app. So normally when you talk about an app in the world of blockchain, we call them as dApp. So as a dApp developer, it is your job to connect to the particular blockchain. So let's say this is a blockchain, right? To connect to a particular blockchain and fetch the data. So of course, you can't actually search for this data at runtime. The example, let's say if a user fires a query, user want to search for a particular thing, and this dApp will search in a blockchain, it will take huge amount of time. We don't want to waste that time, right? We want it to be done instantly. In that case, as a dApp developer, you need to index all this data in your server, in your service, and that will be time consuming. In fact, first of all, you have to write application, you have to write some extra feature. And as a developer, I always believe that you should focus only on the use case, your use case, not on this extra thing. So this indexing problem can be solved with the help of subquery. So if I take you to the subquery network, what it says. So subquery is basically for developers to create the products for the decentralized future. And the thing is, it's actually taking a lot of time to move from web 2.0 to 3.0 because we have to change so many things and there are some features which are missing. And subquery is helping with that feature, one of the feature which is indexing. Specifically, I'm talking about the blockchain like Polkadot, Avalanche, and Cosmos. So subquery supports all those. And if you want to know more, you can just read this white paper, which is very beautifully written. And in fact, we'll be making more videos on subquery, how exactly subquery works, and how about creating your own subquery project. And subquery also supports that once you have made a project, you can deploy it on the subquery network itself. So they also provide you managed services. You can see we have it here. So subquery is great for the indexing of the Polkadot. In fact, it supports multiple blockchain. So let me in the comment section how excited you are for subquery. It's a very great tool because it provides you with the indexing of the blockchain. In fact, in my machine, I've already written a code from the documentation and I was able to fetch all the data in my machine. And it actually makes sense because if I make an application, I can directly use the central service. I know it sounds weird to have a central service because we are talking about decentralization, but using Subquery Network, they are also moving towards the decentralized indexing. Let's try to install Subquery and let's try it out on the machine itself so that you will understand what it does and how do we write our own Subquery projects. Now, since this is our first video, maximum time will be spent on doing a setup. Now, of course, on your machine, you need multiple things to make it work. There's not a simple project, right? Basically, we are running a project which will index the entire blockchain. Okay, now which blockchain we are focusing here? We are focusing on Polkadot and we'll try to index the blocks. So every time you create a new block, we'll try to index that. That will be quite fun, right? Okay, so what are the things you need? So the first thing you need in your machine is Node.js. So make sure that you have Node.js. Now, how do you verify Node.js? You can just go to terminal and you can type node. And if you get the node prompt, that means you have node installed. Otherwise, if you don't have it, you just have to go to Google. And then you just have to go to Google and search for Node.js download. And this is where you will get your download, right? So you have to click on this and you can select your OS, Windows, Mac, or Linux. There will be option of Linux as well. There are binaries available. And once you do this, download that, install it. It's very simple. And with Node, you also need NPM. So once you get Node, you can also download NPM here. So you can download NPM as well. So just follow these steps and you can download the NPM. So you got two things. You got Node.js and you got NPM. There is an option for NPM. You can also go for a Yarn download. In my machine, I do have Yarn and I feel Yarn bit better than NPM. But again, it depends upon your liking. If you like NPM, go with that. Otherwise, you can also use Yarn. Both works. In fact, I've tested both the softwares for Subquery and both works perfectly. I saw some of the people complaining about Yarn, but I have not faced that issue. So let me know in the comment section if you're still facing issue with Yarn installation or Yarn with Subquery. Okay, now the next thing you need. The next thing you need is Docker. So of course, right, you need to run this on your machine. So in your machine, it is better to have a Docker to run it. And by default, the image which you get runs on Docker. So make sure that you get Docker. Now, how will you download Docker? So you have to say Docker download, and you can just go to the website, Docker home, and you can download Docker from here, or you can also download from Docker desktop, depending upon which machine you're using, for Windows or for a Mac, it has the option. So make sure that you got node, npm, yarn, and Docker. Now, once you have this thing in your machine, what next? We also need an editor where you can edit this stuff, right? And for that, we'll be using VS Code. So make sure that you have your VS Code installed. If you love any other editor, that's your choice, but we'll be using VS Code here, which works well. So download, again, just to repeat, node, npm, yarn. Node, npm, and yarn is an option. Then Docker and VS Code. Now, once you have these things in your machine, let's get started. Hold on. Even if you have all this thing, where is Subquery? Of course, we need to get the Subquery project as well. So what we'll do, the first thing we'll do here is we'll open our VS Code. So we'll do everything in VS Code itself, and we'll open a simple project. In fact, a simple folder. So what I will do, so this is my VS Code. I will click on File, and I will click on Open Folder. And in this, in my own folder, my user folder, let me create, it says Subq as a folder. I know that's a weird name, but that's for Subquery. And click on Open. Now this is where I will create my project. This is where I will do all the stuff. Let me close this one. Okay. Now once you got your project, we need to have a Subquery setup in this machine. Now the thing is, in my machine I already have Subquery installed, but what if you want to do it? So it's very simple. You have to click on New Terminal, and we'll increase this size a bit. I think it should be visible. Okay, now with this terminal, you have to enter some commands. So just follow my commands. So as I mentioned, you can use npm or yarn. This time let's use npm to do that, because most of you might be using npm. So we'll say npm install, and we'll do that globally @ Subquery client. So basically we are getting this Subquery CLI, which is the way to interact with the Subquery project, right? Now, the moment you do enter, it will download it. In fact, in my machine, I already have it. I'm not sure if I get an error, because it will say, hey, you already have it. Why you want the same software multiple times? But in case if you get a new version, because I've installed it last week, there might be some new updates. So it's installing, let's wait for it, and we'll resume after this. Okay, so as you can see, we got this Subquery client install or CLI installed. Now, how do we verify this? So first of all, let me say clear, and I will say subql help, and you can see we got all the commands which we're going to use. Now, out of this, what are the commands we are going to use? We are going to use build to build the project. We have code generation. This will be useful for the GraphQL. Then we have init to create a Subquery starter project. We will not be using migrate. We might do publish later, and then there's also command for validate. But here, let's try to go with the first step. So what we need here is we need to get this Subquery project. Now, the thing is, you don't have to do everything from the basic or everything from the scratch, right? And that's the benefit which you get using Subquery. You get a project which will help you to index the blockchain. So let me just clear this. And how do you initiate a project? So it's very simple. You say subql, and the command you use is init. That's it. The moment you say enter, it will ask you for certain things. It will ask you for a project. Now, basically, we are creating a starter project which will have basic elements. Of course, we'll make some changes there. So here, it is asking for the project name. The name I will enter here is, let's say, okay, first of all, what exactly we are doing here. What I'm trying to do is, if I go to my browser again, if I type Polkadot Explorer, and if I go to the first link here, so we'll be using Polkadot Network, not Kusama. So basically, we just want to index all the blocks, and each block will have certain information, right? So I want this information. So every time it creates a new block, I want it to call our handler. Okay, that's what we want. Now, the only thing is, now since we will be running this, it will start indexing from the first block. Okay, and that's the tricky part, right? We need to wait for some time to get the result, but until we'll get some gist, right? It is indexing the files. So these are the things we need. Maybe I will try to fetch the origin. I will try to fetch the extrinsic. So basically in Polkadot Network or Substract Network, you have certain things there. We have events, we have extrinsics, we have calls. In fact, we have calls in Avalanche, if I'm not wrong. No, we have call. The log is there in Avalanche. So basically we have multiple things to work with, multiple handles to work with. So we'll see those one by one. If you're getting confused, don't worry, just be with me. Once you see the code, it will make much more sense. Okay, so basically we are trying to create a project for fetching the extrinsics. So we'll say ext. Of course, you can have any name. We'll say X demo. I will say enter. Okay, now it will ask you for which project you want to support. So basically it supports Avalanche, Substrat and Terra. So I want to go for Substrate. So I will say enter. Now in Substrate, it has multiple options. We'll select Polkadot. That's one. And now do you want a starter project or do you want to go for, do you have an existing project which you want to fetch? So we'll go for the starter project this time and then we'll try to see if we can get some GitHub projects. We'll say enter. And it will take some time to create that project for you. Now it is asking for the RPC endpoint. So we'll go with this basic one. So this is basically, this is the company, One Finality, which is the company of Subquery. And this is the API for Polkadot. So we'll not change this. They have already done the indexing. We'll use that. From where you're getting the Subquery starter project from the GitHub. So we'll use that as it is. And of course, if you have your own Subquery starter project, you can just mention your GitHub repository. Next, it will ask you for the author name. So since it is MIT license, I will use my name there. And the description, okay, I don't want to change the description. Version, this is my first project, so I will go with the same version. So if you want to change it, then only mention, otherwise you can just say enter. You can also mention the licensor, but then since this is MIT license, we'll continue with that. And then that's it, your project is ready. So you can see it's so simple. We have not done any coding yet and we got the project. And this project has all the basic things you need. So example, if I expand this, see the number of files you have. So basically we got the package.json. That means we need to install some packages. That's very important. We don't have those packages as of now. So what are the packages we need here? So these are dependencies we need. And also, we have some commands which we are going to use. We are going to use CodeGen. We are going to use start Docker. Otherwise, you can just copy this and turn on the Docker. In fact, in my machine, I already have a Docker. I'm not running it now. I want to show you the errors which you get while running, because when I was doing this, I got multiple errors. So it's better to learn from my mistakes, right? So let's do this. Okay, next we need to also focus on this file, which is schema.graphql. Now, what happens is every time you have a block on the blockchain, every block will have different information. It will have the information about the transaction. It will have the information about the outside world as well. It will have the information of rewards. So we need to get those information. Of course, we don't want everything. We can specify what exactly we want. And you can mention those things in this schema.graphql. Okay. So we'll do all those steps. The first thing we'll do is we'll first of all move to the extend demo folder and let's install all the packages which are required. So I will say npm install and done. It will install all the dependencies which is required. Okay, so basically we got all the packages which are required and those things will be available in the node module. So you can see it is downloaded all these packages and one of it is Subquery. We also got it for Terra, we got it for Substrat. So basically we can use all these things while working on the project. Great. Okay, so we got the packages. What next? So basically these are the files we have to change to specify what exactly we need. Apart from this, this is the important file. The file here is, so this is your YAML file. In this YAML file, you can see we are basically running this to the Subquery node and Subquery query itself. And then this is coming from the repository. This is what we mentioned. Now, this is the important thing we have to remember. When you connect with a network, it will ask you for the chain ID. So we have mentioned the chain ID here. And this is the endpoint which I have already taken. Remember that when we were fetching the project, we have to specify these things. And then this is your data source, in which this is important. Of course, the runtime will change based on what you select. We have selected Substrat, so it is giving you Substrat. But then if you go for Avalanche or Terra, it will change. Based on what runtime you're using, even your handlers will change. In Avalanche, I guess we have some extra handlers to use. But in Substrate, we have block, we have handle event, and we have handle call. Now, in our first code, which we are going to do, we will be only focusing on the block, not on event and call. So we'll only focus on the block. So this handle is basically will be called every time a new block is created. Handle event is for the events. Every time you have an event, the advantage is one block can have multiple events, right? And you can filter those events, which event you want to focus on. Example, here by default, they are saying every time there is a deposit, that's why it will be called. Otherwise, you can also go for calls for the extrinsic values. Extrinsics are basically whatever is getting called from the outside world of the blockchain. Okay, apart from this, we have one more things to open. If you expand SRC and if you do mapping, we have a mapping handler and see the method names. So basically we have handle block, we have handle event, and we have handle call. For these files which we have talked about, remember, handle block, handle event, and handle call. For those things, we have a mapping here. So these are the mapping: handle event, handle call, and handle block. Now, one important thing, if I go back to schema.graphql, you can see the name of the entity. The name of the entity by default is starter entity. This is what represents what you're fetching from the blockchain. You can have any name, doesn't matter. Now, with the same name, there will be a mapping JS file which we don't have as of now. So basically we need types, and that's why you can see we are getting error. How will you get those things? So that we'll see in the next video. So what are the things we have done till now? We have done with all the setup. We got Node, NPM, Docker, and then we have also pulled the Subquery project with the help of Subquery client, and we got this project. Now we need to make some changes because if you can see, GraphQL is having all these fields which doesn't have a name. We want to specify what we want to fetch. We want to fetch the block number. We want to fetch the block height, maybe the origin, and we can specify all those things there. And when we run it, we'll get all the data. So till this point, we have talked about what is Subquery Network and why it is called the Google of blockchain. Now in this video, let's try to understand who are the participants in this Subquery network. Of course, right, whenever you want to build a network, but whenever you want to provide the services, we need people, we need entities in this network who is going to provide you service, who is going to consume the service, who will be the supporters, and all those aspects. So in this video, let's talk about those aspects. Now, first of all, in this Subquery network, the idea is to provide data service. So whenever we talk about blockchain, of course, we have amazing projects coming up. Now, the only problem is how will you search data in this blockchain network? So Subquery says, don't worry, I will provide you with that data service so that as a dApp developer, you have to focus only on the business logic. And the data will be provided with the help of Subquery network. Now in this network, we have multiple participants. Let's talk about top three. The first one is the consumer who will consume your service, indexer who will provide the service, and then we have delegators who is going to support the indexers. Now let's talk about consumer first. Now consumer is a participant who can be an individual or it can be an organization. So basically consumer will send the request for data. Of course, right, it's all about data. So a consumer will request for the data, and for that service, of course, we need to pay something for the service, right? So they will be paying SQT, which is the Subquery token, and they will receive the service. So basically you have to pay SQT for the service. Now these consumers can be dApp developers, they can be data analysis companies, or they can be blockchain network itself, or maybe middleware developers, or a web aggregating companies who will be servicing to the Web2 clients. So a consumer looks simple, right? But then if a consumer wants the service, who is going to provide the service? And that's where we have indexers. Now indexers are responsible for indexing the blockchain data and providing this data to their customers. Now, as I mentioned before, it's all about data, right? So indexers actually provides data as a service. Now to provide that service, they have to do a huge investment for the infrastructure, for the data accumulation, and for providing support as well. So basically, they turn computational and networking powers into profits. Now, apart from this computational and networking services, they have to also stake SQT for a particular project. Now they have a minimum limit there, so they have to stake minimum SQT to get that particular project. Based on the service they provide, they receive the rewards, right? Now to receive the rewards, first they have to provide the service, plus they have to also stake in the network. Now you might be saying why they have to stake. See, one reason is, what if your indexer is misbehaving? What if your indexer is giving you wrong data, or maybe incomplete data, or maybe a corrupt data? In that case, an indexer is liable for a penalty. So some of the portion of that allocated stake will be reallocated to the Subquery Foundation treasury. There's one more interesting thing here. If indexer want to receive more rewards, they have to stake more. So the more they stake, they will get higher profit. Now, if you want more money, if you want more SQT, of course you need help as well. So in this case, we have some non-technical participants in the network. Now they don't have to be a developer or a network engineer or anyone. Anyone can be a support, and we call them as a delegators. So as I mentioned before, delegators are there to support the indexers, so they can stake, they can help indexers by staking their SQTs, and they can get something in reward. So every time an indexer gets a reward, they can share the portion of it with the delegators. So basically we have this participants in the network. Apart from this, we also have people or architects who are building the subquery projects. And we have done that, right? So in this series, we are basically trying to be that architect who is building a subquery project and putting it on the subquery network, right? So basically we have these 4 participants, but then we focus more on the first 3. The first one is a consumer who will consume the data. The second is the indexer who will host those projects on their infrastructure. And for that, they are basically spending huge power on the computational and network aspect. And of course, they will get the rewards for that. And who will support for their minimum staking or extra stake in the network is your delegators. Now, this time, we will be writing a code and we'll make it work. Now, the project which we got is a blank project, right? Not exactly blank, but then it is doing the stuff which they want to do it. Now we have to do what we want, right? So first of all, if you look at this Schema Graphql, we have all these fields which are field 1, field 2. We don't want this, right? We want the fields which we want to fetch. So we'll start editing from here itself. So the first thing I want to change here is I don't want to go for the starter entity. I want to name it as extrinsic. And then I want to change the field. So ID is compulsory, so we'll not mention that here. So ID is compulsory. The next field I want to fetch here is block hash, and the type of block hash will be string. The next thing we need is block height, and it will be also of type string. In fact, we'll remove this part. Next we need is origin, which will be of type string as well. So we need 4 things. We need ID, block hash, block height, and origin. Now what is a block height? So if you remember when we went to the Polkadot website or the Explorer, this is the height I'm talking about. So every time you have a new block, that number is a height. Okay, and if I go back, and every block will be having a hash, we want to fetch that as well. Cool. So basically for every schema, we need to map it with a JS file to make it work. Now how do we generate that JS file? It's very simple. I will say npm run script. And the script I want to run, if you remember, we have in package.json, this script I want to run is this, code gen. So I will go back here and I will say code gen. I will say enter. Now it is generating the files, and where you will find it, this is a folder where we have this. So if I open types in models, you can see we have extrinsic. This is what we wanted. And if I open this, it will have all the fields which are mentioned in that schema. So we have ID, we have block hash, we have block height, we have origin, and the methods to make it work. So we are going to use save to save it. Otherwise, we have remove, get, create, but then we are going to use the save method. Now, how do we create an entity? So, if you are not familiar with entities, so it is very famous in the world of programming as well. Example, Java or any other language. So if you want to store some kind of object into database, we directly make them as entity. In database, you might be knowing this concept as entity relationship. So those are entities. This is almost same. Okay. So basically, we need to get this extrinsic, and there is also some changes in this index.js. If you can see index.js, it is importing not JS, TS, because this is TypeScript. It is importing the models, right? And that's why it is working. Okay, that's the first step we have done. The next thing I want to check is this project.yaml. Now, of course, we don't want everything from here. What are things we want? We want to focus only on block. So if you just want to focus on block, not on the event, not on this call, just remove it. As simple as that, right? I know that looks crazy, but that's how you do it. And just remember one thing. Sometime when you pull this project, they might be having chain ID and Genesis hash. If you have both in this network, remove one. Either remove Genesis hash or remove chain ID. If you have both, it will give you error. And I've faced that a lot. Okay, so make sure that you only have chain ID or Genesis hash. Okay, that's the only change we need to make here, nothing else. The next thing I want to change is this mapping handler. Now, since if you remember, the first thing you have to change is we are not working with starter entity, we are working with extrinsic. So we'll mention that. Okay, we'll say save. So we are working with Polkadot, we are working with extrinsic. And then the only thing we want to change is block. We don't want to work with event and call. We can just simply remove it. So I don't want to work with handle event. I don't want to work with call, just the handle block. So basically every time it will create a new block, it will call this handle. Okay, and we'll not be using the existing code, but let me just remove that. So basically, what are the things we need? So the first thing we need to get is the block hash. Remember in the schema.graphql, we are fetching the hash. And then with that hash, we need to also get hold on this height and the origin. So what I will do is I will say const block hash is equal to block.block. So basically, this is the block object we are using here. So in this block object, you have a block inside of it. With that block, I will say I want to fetch the header because that's where you will find the hash. And in this header, you will be having the hash. And I want to convert that hash into string because the format we have defined is string. Now, once we got the block hash, now it's time to create let's wait. So let's use a promise here, promise.all. So again, with the help of block.block, and we'll fetch all the extrinsics. As I mentioned, block will have events, extrinsics, and stuff. So we'll be using extrinsics. Okay, extrinsics dot map. Now with this, it will throw the blocks one by one. So we'll say async, and we'll save that. We'll pick up one extrinsic at a time. You can see it will throw all the extrinsics. We want to fetch one at a time. And with that one extrinsic, what I will do is I'll perform some operation on that extrinsic, and we'll give a semicolon here. Okay. Now, there's one more thing. We want to get only those extrinsics which are signed. So basically, there are two things: signed transaction, unsigned transaction. So we'll only focus on the signed one. So we'll check if the extrinsic dot is signed. That's how you check if it is signed or not. If it is signed, then we'll perform some operation. We'll say const origin equal to, we'll fetch the origin first. So we'll say extrinsic, because see, all the data which is there, it will be coming in this extrinsic. And with that, we'll fetch the origin. So we'll say extrinsic dot signer dot toString. That's how you get who is the origin. Then we'll fetch the entity. So why do we need this entity? So basically, when you fetch all these values, you're fetching your block hash, you're fetching your block height, you're fetching your origin. You will assign everything to an entity, and then you will save the entity as it is. So let's create an entity first. It will be a extrinsic type entity, and it will relate it to this particular hash, extrinsic dot hash dot toString. Okay, so we got toString, and then once you got the entity object, we'll assign data one by one. So first we'll assign the block hash, and the block hash will be coming from this block hash because that is what we have already fetched. The next thing I want to fetch is entity dot block height. Now this block height will be coming from the block itself. So we'll say block dot header dot number dot to big int. And then we have to also specify the origin. So we'll say entity dot origin is equal to, we have already fetched the origin part. So we'll directly assign it here. And once you got all the value, there's an error here. Is there a spelling mistake? Okay, block height is of type string. Is it of type string? Okay. Block height is of type big int, not string. So we'll make the changes there. And since we are changing the schema, we have to make sure that you also change the mapping file. I mean the extrinsic type, and you can see it should now be big int. Okay, that's done. And once you have all this value, it's time to say save. So I will say await entity dot save. And that's done. So basically, till this point, we were able to create this mapping file, and we are only doing for the block handle, right? We're not doing for other stuff. And we have done a change here as well. Instead of block height being string, I've made it big int because that makes sense. The height, it's a height, it's a number. And then done the mapping, project.yaml, okay, everything looks good. Now what's next step? Now once you have your project ready, once you have your code ready, the next step is to build this project. Now how do you build? Again, the same steps. So for running the script, you will say run script. And the thing you will do is the command you have to fire is build. So say build, it will take some time to build. And you can see the building is done. Can we see the building here? No. Okay. Now, once we have the build ready, it's time to run the project. Now, to run the project, we have to make sure that you explore the Docker file first, because when you say it will run the service, what type of service it will run? So basically, it will try to index all the file, and it will fetch the data. It will index the file, and it will fetch the data into a Postgres database, which will be running on your machine. So make sure that you have a decent machine before running this thing. Otherwise, you can directly deploy on the Subquery network, and you don't even have to run on your machine because it basically consumes a lot of memory and the CPU power. So basically, it will download, it will run a Postgres Docker. It will also run a subquery node on your machine, and it will also run the GraphQL engine. So basically, think about this. It will run all the service on your machine. Okay, so you have to also make sure that your Docker is running. As of now, my Docker is not running. So let's see what happens if your Docker is not running and if you hit this. So to start the Docker, we'll again run the same things, run a script, and that's start Docker. I will say enter. So you can see we got the error, right? Because the Docker is not running. So you have to make sure that your Docker is started, and it should give you a way of showing that it is running. So you can see my Docker is starting now, and it will start running in some time. Okay, now it is started, I guess. Now it's still not there. Let me just clear the screen first. Docker started. Let me just say start. And this time, the moment you do that, it will pull the images. You can see it is pulling Postgres, subquery node, and GraphQL engine. Okay, it is creating the Postgres instance as well. It will take some time. And done, it's running. You can see that the node is running. And if you can see the command line, what is happening here? It is fetching the block. The block fetching started from 1. And we have seen that on the Polkadot Explorer, right? We have around 16 million. I'm not even sure the number. It's a very big number. So it is indexing 100 blocks at a time. And as of now, it is indexed only 1400 block. Okay, so it is running. That's a good thing. Now, how do we verify? How do we run this thing? So you have to go to localhost :3000, and this is what you need to specify. So basically, we are running a GraphQL query. So we are firing a query, and all the extrinsics, all the blocks basically. And this is, so basically we are trying to fetch the first 10, and we are only fetching node ID. And first we have to make sure that this is working. So when you run this code, if you run this query, you can see we got the first 10 IDs. Okay, but then we just don't want ID, right? What else we want? We want the block hash, we want the block height, and we also want the origin. That's it. We need these 4 things here. And if I run this code with this, and you can see for every block, we got the number, block height, we got the origin as well. So this is the first 10. Now, why only 3000? Why not the latest number which you are getting in the Explorer? It is because if you go back to your terminal, see the indexing done. The indexing is done till 8000 now. And this time if I fire this, should I say last, enter, okay. I guess it's working with the cluster, one cluster at a time. Okay, just fetching all the extrinsics. The only thing is we have to order by, we'll order by what? We want to order by the block height. And that in this descending format, run, and you can see this fetching the latest one. So this is how you index, and all this indexing is happening in your machine, in your Postgres database. So till this point, we were able to run this subquery project. So basically we are indexing all the blocks on the Polkadot network. And now from a long time, in fact, it's been a few hours, and continuously my machine is indexing the subquery network. And you can see I have reached around 0.5 million blocks, and it is still indexing more. Okay, now if I go back to the page and if I run the same query, this time you will get a different result, and you can see you will get a block height of this. The more time you spend running this, the more blocks you will get in the indexing. So this is fun, right? And you can change these things as well. Maybe you don't want to get the origin, you just want to focus on the block hash and height. You can query for that and you will get the values, right? And you can just, you can sort this based on some other values as well. So what are the values we have? Maybe you can do it with the hash, descending of hash, and you can do that as well. So all these things are good, right? But then when I talked about indexing this on your own machine, let me show you something. So let me open my Docker and let's see how many instances are running or how many images are running. So the moment I open Docker, you can see we have 3 images which are running. One is a GraphQL. So you were able to query this with the help of GraphQL because of this engine. Second is the subquery node, and third is the Postgres. So basically you have this database installed on your machine in the Docker. And the way you can access Postgres is with the help of pgadmin. So if you want to see the data, if you don't want to, that's fine. But then in this video, I wanted to show you how it looks like in the Postgres. So you can simply open pgadmin. And if you don't have this software installed, you can just have to install this. You can search for pgadmin. And the latest version is 4. So I'm using that. It will take some time to open. So this is opening. Okay, now what's the password for this? Now, if you want to find the password, you can just go back to your VS Code, and in this Docker Compose itself, yeah, this here, you can see we are using Postgres, and this is the password. So you can use Postgres as a password, enter, and now you are in, if I'm not wrong. So you can just expand this servers, and okay, so server connected. So that's my machine, that's the database. Now, if you can see in schema, we have two things. We have app and we have public. So I want to go to app, and here, if I expand the tables, there's a table called extrinsics. This is what the entity we have created, right? So your entity name will be defined this name. So example, if your entity name is transfer, this will be transfers, because it will be collection of all this transfer. Okay, I want to see the data of it, right? So this looks good, but then I want to see the data. And the way you can do that is we can right click here and say, I want to go for the query tool. And what query we are going to use? We are going to use, okay, I already have a query here. So the query I want to fire is select star from extrinsic. And if I run this code, okay, it's not able to find extrinsics because it belongs to app schema. So we'll say app and run. Okay, you can see we got all this record. So this is your ID, this is your block hash, and this is your block height and origin. I can simply sort it by block height, or maybe you can fire the order query. So you can say order by descending order, and here we go. So these are all the indexes you got till now. So this is 571852, and if I go back to my Visual Code, and that's what the indexing it is doing, right? It's almost nearby. So basically it is saving everything on your machine. What you can also do is you can build the Subquery project and you can push it on the managed service provided by the Subquery network. So that is one option you have there. Cool, so that's the thing. In fact, I would suggest you to change this password before deployment, and you can customize everything from this file. So basically at this point, we have learned about what Subquery Network is. We have also discussed why it is called Google of blockchain. And then we were able to get the project. In fact, we did the setup first, and then we created our first code. And then we were able to run it as well, right? So what we have done till this point, let me just give you a big go through, and then we'll build this project. And instead of running it on console, of course, we'll do that as well. Instead of running on this machine, we'll also deploy it on this Subquery network so that your project will be public and anyone can access it on this Subquery network with the help of Subquery Explorer. So basically that's how you build a project, right? First you build a project, then you deploy it on the some server. Example, if you build a normal web application, you make it accessible to the entire world by deploying it somewhere. Now the best thing is Subquery Network provides you a managed service. So basically when you deploy your project there, anyone can access the data, anyone can access your project. And that's what we want, right? That's the idea of building this project. So just to give you a go through what we have done till this point, we were able to create a starter project, which was not having anything much, simple stuff. And then we are only basically handling the blocks here, right? So that's what we have done. In fact, we'll also do it for, how do we do it for normal events? As of now, we are only dealing with blocks. So basically this is your block here. And then if every time a new block is created, you are basically trying to map it. And then in the last video, we have also discussed it will take normally some time to, download some projects. And it will take some time for the syncing of the blocks. And maybe you can just wait once we do it, and then you can wait and you can see how the blocks is getting created. In fact, I have already deployed one project, which I will show you how much time it takes for the syncing. Of course, we are going to use the free service. It will take much time, but if you want to do it on a production server and if you want it fast, there's another service as well. Okay, so we'll discuss all those things. How do we do the production? What if you want to go for staging? Because sometimes you don't directly push your project on this server. You want to get the staging as well. So we'll talk about it, how that production or the staging actually works out, and we'll discuss when to use what. Okay, so basically we were able to create this project, and then every time you get a new block, you will get it here. It will be syncing. And for that, what we have done is, first of all, we need to create this schema in which you are saying, hey, I just want this for information. And that's the advantage of using GraphQL, right? You don't actually get everything which you have there. If you want only 4 fields, you can fetch those 4 fields. And basically we want the extrinsic events. And for the mapping, this is our mapping file. And then Docker is also there, which we don't have to do any changes here. It will run the subquery node. It will run the GraphQL server as well on your machine. So this is what we have done. Now what we'll do here is, one more thing before, we have the extrinsic TypeScript file as well, in which you have the classes which is mapping to your GraphQL. Of course, you don't have to design this class. Once you define your GraphQL schema, you can just run a code which is CodeGen, which will generate the classes for you. Now, the name of this project will be different from the last video. This is Q1 because for the last project, I did some changes which I don't want to talk about here. I was doing some experiment, so we created this blank new project which looks exactly the same as the last project. So if you are following this series and if you have done with Q, Subquery, that was project name, you can use the same project and do the same steps. So the first I'm going to do here is I'm going to build this project. Now, how do we build this project? You can use yarn or you can use npm. So I guess we used npm last time, so I will also continue with npm. So we'll say npm run script, and then you need to build this. So you can simply say build. It will take some time. Oh, okay. So I have to get into this project, which is subquery test. So the sub project name is also changed. This is subquery text. Whatever project name you have with you, you can continue with that. So you need to build this, and by building it has given me some error. So I guess the CodeGen is also not done for this. Okay. So I'm just trying to debug what is happening here. Script is running, everything is there. Maybe the VS Code is having some issue with the project. What I will do is I will just open my code once again. And it's normal with new projects, right? Every time you work with some project and then they might be not properly synced. So let me just do that once again. Subquery test, and again we'll say npm run script build. Okay, building done. There was some issue with the VS Code and this syncing. Maybe the project was open for a long time. And now before running this, you have to make sure that your Docker is on running state. And let me just remove all the old projects which I have here. So I was doing testing before the video and it was working. So let me just go back here and say run script. And this time we'll say start Docker. Okay, now all these commands are actually mentioned in the package.json and in the Docker compose. So when I say start Docker, it will use all this configuration and it will start the Docker for you. It might not work in first go. It is happening with me as well because of some configuration issues. So just try to restart your Docker if you face issue, and then this should work. So as you can see, your project is actually in running state. Now, how do you verify this? It's very simple. You can just go to your browser and say localhost colon 3000, and this is your query field. And you can enter your query here. So you can say query, and you can open the brackets. And in this query, you can say, I want to fetch the extrinsics. And then you can specify what criteria you want here. And with this criteria, you can also mention what are the things you need. So basically, the criteria here is very simple. You want to get first 10 elements or 5 elements, whatever you can mention, and also what order you want to go for. I want to order by with the block height in descending order. And of course, since we are running this again, it will fetch from start. And then what exactly you want from the nodes, basically you want the ID, then you want the block hash, and then you want the block height, and you want origin as well. And then just run this and you can see you will get this script. The only thing is, okay, syncing is already done on this. You can see the block height is coming with a good number. So that means the code is actually running from a long time. Awesome. If you are doing this for the first time, you might not get all the values. Cool. Now, instead of running it on local, so what we are doing is we are saying localhost colon 3000, right? So only my application which are deployed on this machine is able to use it. But what if you want to make it public? In that case, you have to publish it. Now, how do you publish it? So let's follow the steps for that. So go back to your VS Code. Now, the first thing you have to do is if you want to publish, you have to follow some steps. So there are some basic requirements for this. First of all, your project, whatever you're doing, it should be either on GitHub or on IPFS. Now, we are going to follow the steps for GitHub, which is much simpler. You can also do it for IPFS. And let me in the chat, in the comment section, if you want the IPS version as well. IPFS, not PS. And so now we are going to do it for the GitHub. So let's follow the steps for that. So you have to make sure that your project is on GitHub as a public repository, and then you have to go to project.subquery.network. This is where you are going to do this, and for that you need to use a login. So I will use my GitHub login here, and when I click on that, I already have logged into GitHub. So you can see this is my GitHub ID, which is Navin2020. In fact, there's one more advantage of this is normally when you go for public projects or when you go for enterprise projects, we have this tendency of using organization account. So I'm using it on my personal machine or personal account, but if you want to use the organization, you can also do the setup for GitHub. So go to GitHub and you can set the organization, and you can publish this project on the organization itself. Now, since we are into learning stage, I'm going to use the personal ID as well. That perfectly works. Now, all the project which is mentioned, it will be available here. Now, this is the free service which I'm going to use. So I guess you will be having only two options. In fact, two projects at the same time. So that those are the max projects you can have here, and try with different projects and let's see if that works. But I think it will only support two projects. Now, what are the steps you have to follow? So basically, I already have one service. So instead of going for that, we'll talk about how do we create your own project. But let me show you how my project looks like. So this is the project which I've already deployed, which is Subquery test. And I'm not sure if I have the same name, will it work? But let's try. And if not, then we'll delete the old project. So basically, this is how the thing will look like. So you can see you need to have your GitHub repository. I already have my GitHub repository. We can just clone it from there. And this is Subquery, the old project. The new project have the same code, and I will do that step so that you will understand how do you push your project to the GitHub and how do you track it. Next, you have to make sure that you have your shared database, because in the free account you will be using a shared database. If you want a dedicated database, you have to go for the pricing model. And now I have did this 4 days ago, and only you can see 28% have been synced, because I'm not using this continuously, right? So if I use this continuously, it will be much faster, but it will take some time for the syncing as well. Now they do provide you one more option, which is staging slot. So basically, whenever you build a project, and if your project is already deployed, and if you want to upload a new version, and that's what we do, right? Every time you make some changes, you deploy the new project. So instead of directly deploying it on the production, which will be risky, because let's say if your project is deployed and people are using it, and suddenly you're making a changes and you're pushing it, first of all, it will be down for some time because you are making a change. Second, what if your code fails in the production? We don't want that, right? We don't want the user to get affected. In that case, you will be using the staging slot. So the first thing you will do is you will push your project on the staging area, and then you will publish it. And this will be your query endpoint if you want to use it in your project. And every project will have the hash value as well. So you can see we have the hash value here. And when you want to upgrade, this hash value will be important. Anything else here? Yeah, there are two things. So we have to also mention the indexer version. So indexer version currently, if you're watching this video now, it is 1.1.2. So as of recording, it is 1.1.2. The query version, the subquery version is 1.1.1. It might change depending upon when exactly you're watching this video. In fact, there's also an option you can delete this project. Maybe if you want to go for a new project, or you're just doing it for testing purpose, you can delete it. And I always believe, if you're not using something, just delete the project. Don't waste the resources. I know it's free, but then don't bulk up the resources. Okay, if you want to deploy the new version, you can just click on new version, but again, don't do that in production directly. Yeah, if you don't have any user using it, you can do it. And then what if you want to explore on the Explorer in a public repository? As I mentioned, once you publish a project, anyone can access your project, right? So you can just click on this Explorer. This is how it looks like. And then this is where you can do the same query. So I already have a query written here. Let me increase the font size for you. So this is my query. You can run it. And this is the number of syncing already done. Now the beauty is this is public. So even you can access it if you have my endpoint. Okay, cool. So this is working, and you can see total size is of 10 MB or 10.8 MB, and currently it has only synced 3.1. Awesome. But then we don't want to use my project, right? We want to deploy the new project. In that case, what are the steps? So let me just go back, and this is how you do it. So click on the create project. Now it will ask you for some certain information. Of course, you can upload your project logo. Of course, if you have a new project, you can have a new logo, and you can put it here. Now, since we are into learning phase, we'll not do that. It will ask you for your GitHub account. Okay, same account which you have used. And as I mentioned before, if you want to go for the organization, and if you have the organization account, you will get the option here as well. Next, you have to mention your project name. Of course, this project name can be anything which you want. I'm saying Subquery Q Telusko. Of course, doesn't matter what the project name is. So I will say Subquery Telusko. And then you can add a subtitle for this project. So this is my test project. And you can add some description what exactly this project does. So you can say, hey, this is used for fetching the blocks and indexing the blocks, and you can mention that here. Now this is interesting because it is also asking you for your GitHub repository URL. Now as of now, the project which we have created in the VS Code, which is in my machine, is not pushed on the server. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have your GitHub repository. So let me go to my GitHub account and I will create a new repository here. And if you have not followed me on GitHub, that's my GitHub ID, which is Navin 2020. Do that. So let me create a new repository here. Let me increase the font size. And let me name this repository as Subq. Subq is already there. I will say Subqt. I'm not good with repository names, but give a proper name. Now, one thing is important. It need to be public. Don't make it private. So keep your repository as public so that there will not be any issue. And you can add the ignore files and all those things. And you can also put your Readme file there. As of now, I'm not doing it just to keep it simple, and click on create repository. So on the GitHub account, say create repository and done. You can see we have a repository. Now, how do we access that? This is your link which you were supposed to use. So you can just copy this link and paste it. Not here. This is my old project. Just paste it here. But there's one more problem, right? We don't have the project in the repository. You can see this is empty. So basically in your VS Code, you have to push your project. Okay. There's one requirement is whenever you push this project, make sure that your GraphQL file is available in the root directory. As of now, we are in subfolders, right? So what I will do is I will open this Subquery test project in my VS Code so that it will be easier to do that. Because I'm into Subq1 now. You can see I'm into Subq1. I want my Subquery test to be the main project. So I will open this folder. So use Subq1, be inside that. Don't be in a subfolder. So make sure that your project name is your main folder and say new terminal. And this is where you will push your project. Okay, what are the steps to push that project? It's very easy. You can just say git init, do that, and git init. You're initializing this project, and that's done. So you can see all this have been indexed. Next, you can add a Readme file, which I don't have it as of now, and I can just say copy this, paste. Of course, we can type it, but since I'm lazy, I'm just doing it. Okay, so it is, we have to basically add all the files. I should have added the git ignore file, but that's okay. And I will say commit, first commit. And you can see all this file has been committed in my local, and now it's time to push it on the repository. Now, where you want to push this? I want to push this in a main branch. So let me create a main branch, and then I can just connect with my remote here. You can just follow the steps and it will be pushing your project on GitHub. And this is not the GitHub session. This is Subquery. So I'm just doing this thing very fast. And the moment you do that, you can see everything is indexed or everything is pushed on the server. How do I verify that? I can just refresh this page and the code should be available. You can see the code is available. Everything is here. Awesome. So yeah. So your Readme file is also available to see how to run this project. Awesome. In fact, next time when you try this, just use my repository and you can pull the project. Even that works. Cool. So once everything is here, once we have our GitHub repository, let's go back to our Subquery network. And here, select the database. Now, since we are into free plan, the only option you will get is share database. So select that. Next option is the deployment source. Now, since we are doing for the first time, we are going to use GitHub as our deployment source. So select GitHub. And that's it. Click on create project and you're done. It was so simple, right? So we got our project on the project, but then it's not properly deployed. You can see it's there, but then we need to deploy to the production. So till this point, we were only able to create the project, right? It's time to deploy it. So what you can do is you can click on deploy to the production slot. Now it will ask you for some certain things, which branch you want to go for. So I want to go for main branch, and which commit. So you can select, we only have one commit, so we can use that. And then it will also ask you for the endpoints. If you want to change the endpoint, you can mention that here, but as of now, we don't want to do anything new. So keep the endpoints as it is, keep the dictionary point as it is. So currently we are using Polkadot. Then we have to specify the indexer version. So currently I'm going for the top version, which is 1.1.2, latest one, and the query version as well, 1.1.1. Again, I always believe when you're learning for the first time, don't make any weird changes. Make sure it is working for the version specified, and then you can do experiment. Okay, done. Nothing to change here as well. Query service looks good. Indexer service looks good. And both, after that, click on deploy update. The moment you say deploy, it may take some time. It will give you that your Of course, it will say success, but if you see it says processing. So it will take some time. By the time it is doing some processing, let's understand the entire dashboard here. So basically, the first thing it will mention is your project name. Remember this name because when you make it public, this is a name which everyone can see. Next, this will be also having your GitHub repository URL, which you can see here. And it will also mention what database you are using. So we are using shared database. Next, this is important, as I mentioned before. For my old project also, we got the hash value. This is hash value. Of course, this will be useful when you redeploy your project. And then it will give you the default query endpoint, which we have here. Again, it will not work now because it's into processing. Once it is over, it will be saying, hey, it is available for you, so you can use it. As of now, we don't even have the endpoints mentioned here. Yeah, so basically we have to wait for this processing to get over. Okay, so processing is done and you can see it is in running state. It took some time, around 7 to 8 minutes to do that, but then finally it is working. There might be some issue. The only problem at this point is you can see the indexing is 0. It just started, so it will take some time. But again, right, you will not do this every time. This is done only once or maybe for the new update. Once indexing is done, you can start the query. In fact, I will not even wait. I just want to explore the Explorer. So how do we explore the project here? So remember this name, which is Subquery Telusko. I will just copy this and we can go to explorer.subquery.net. And so you can see we have all the other projects available, but my project is into community projects. So I can just paste it here and you can see the project is available. And of course, the moment you say it's running, it will be available in your Subquery Explorer. So click on that and you can see it is just started indexing the first few files already indexed. 721 files I haven't been indexed. Oh, that's not MB, that's actually million of things. My bad. And now this is the query available. And now if I run this query and let's see how many files you get. As of now, it's empty. Let it do this at least some indexing. So basically the project is deployed. The network is Polkadot. It is doing the indexing and it's taking some time. Okay, so finally we got our first file. Of course, if you wait for more time, it will give you the files or the result which you're expecting. So you can see we only got one file here. But again, wait for some time and let me know in the comment how much time it is taking for you. But total number of entries is only 1 now, and that's why you got only 1 entry. Okay, cool. So that's how you deploy your project on the Subquery network, and it will be available in the Explorer. So steps to remember: whenever you create a project, make sure that your project is there on the GitHub, and we have seen the steps as well. And these steps is actually available in the GitHub itself. The moment you create a new repository, you will get all these steps. Just copy those steps and so run this. And yeah, that's what I was talking about. Your current plan is limited to 2 projects. Right? If you want more plan, you have to upgrade. But even normally we work with 1 project, right? So that should work. If you want dedicated database, again, you have to do the purchase for that. You have to pay for it. Cool. So that's your Subquery network, Subquery publishing on the network, and we have also explored that on Explorer. So that's about the Explorer. In fact, I want to talk about one more thing. What if you want to learn more about GraphQL? Because we have been working on REST API for a long time and we are happy with it, but we got GraphQL as well, and this is actually exciting. So you can also go to graphql.org learn page and you can access all the documentation here. It's actually quite fun to work with GraphQL. Yes, at the initial stage, you have to do extra setup, which we don't need for REST API. But trust me, whenever you fire the queries, whenever you request for data, instead of getting everything, you can specify what exactly you want in the query itself. Now, how many languages it supports? You can go to graphql.org/code, and these are the languages it supports now. And it supports Java. I'm happy with that. And we got JavaScript, PHP, Go. In fact, major languages have been supported, right? And there are steps here to access it. So yeah, this is about publishing and GraphQL. Now, till this point, we have seen what is Subquery. Then we have seen the participants. We have talked about how do we do the setup for the Subquery. And then we have written our first code. Plus, we have also published that first code on the Subquery network. And then if it is published on the Subquery network, anyone can see the data, anyone can access it. Everything is working, right? But then in the earlier project, the first project which we did it for the blocks. This time we are doing it for the events. So basically, if you remember, in the mapping file we worked with the blocks. Now what I want is, I want to handle the events. That means every time there's an event on the Polkadot network, I want to get the hold on it. Maybe something like a transfer. If you are transferring the amount from one account to the account, That's one event. Now, how do we do the tracking for that? So we'll write a simple code for the transfers, and we'll do that from the scratch in case if you missed the earlier videos. In fact, I would suggest you to watch the earlier videos to get the setup done, because in this video, I'm not going to do the setup. I'm just going to start writing the code. So first thing, how do we check if everything is working? So I have opened my VS Code. Of course, it should be in a folder. I'm using Subquery Transfer, Subquery Transfer as my project name. In fact, not a project name, but a folder name. And inside this folder, I'm going to create a project for the subquery. So basically, we need to open the terminal first just to verify. So here I will say subql. If this is working in your machine, that means everything is good. Say enter. And you can see we got some commands here. That means everything is working. Great. The subquery is there. And in this subquery command, you can see we have build option, codegen, and we have seen this thing. Now what I will do is, let me clear this and let me create a project using subql. So how do we do that? It's very simple. Actually, you can use subql command and simply say init. The moment you say init, it will create a project for you. Of course, it will ask you for certain things. The first thing it will asking you is the project name. I will say this is my subqt, which is subquery transfer. I will say enter, and it will ask me for the network. In fact, I will also suggest you to try out different networks here, which is Avalanche and Terra. I'm going to continue with Substrate. I will say enter. In this, it is asking for the network here. Earlier it was network family, now it is network. In the Substrate, I'm going with Polkadot. And now, do you want a customized project from the Git link which you mentioned, or do you want to create a starter project? I will go for starter in this case, and it will ask you for certain things. Example, RPC endpoint. I just don't want to change it. I just want to go with the dictionary point which is already mentioned. Go with that. Next, the project structure. Do you want a default, or do you want to have specify some Git repository? Again, default. Say enter. Then the author name. Okay, I'm the author, not exactly, but since I'm going to change something, I will use it. And plus, everything is mentioned in the subquery documentation. You can also refer that. I will say Naveen. And description, I don't want to change it. Keep it as it is. So if you don't want to change anything, just say enter. It normally works. And then the version, default, license, default, and done. Your subquery project is all ready. But again, this is a bare bones service or bare bones code. I want to add the code in this project. And just to reiterate what we have learned before, whenever you want to fetch the data from a subquery project, you need to do that with the help of GraphQL, because you can specify what exact data you want to fetch. And in this, so by default, they are giving starter entity, which we are not going to use. And it is giving entity because that's how you represent what you want to fetch. And the fields, by default, field is field 1, field 2. We'll not mention that, we'll change it with the data which we want. And anything else? This is your project.yaml. This is where you're configuring your entire project. And this is important. Let me just close this subquery terminal for a time being. So if you remember, we had block and we had event as well. So we have two kind here. In fact, we have three. We also have call handler, but we'll ignore that for this. We have block and we have event. So in the earlier video, we have talked about blocks. This time we are going for the event. So this is what we are going to work with. And the method is not deposit. It will be transfer. So we'll change it accordingly. And based on this particular GraphQL, we'll also need a model, a type here, which as of now, I don't think it's there. In mapping, we don't have it. But we have this mapping handler.ts where you have all the methods or functions mentioned. In this, we are not going to use block handle, so that will be removed. And we are only going to work with handle event, not even handle call. Okay, that's the bare bone what you get here, and we're going to make changes in this. We're not going to change anything in Docker Compose because everything default services are running, and we're not even going to publish this. We are going to run this on my local machine just to see everything is working. But in case if you want to publish this project, again, we have done that in the previous video. The same steps will be working with all the projects which you have done. So don't worry, it is applicable for this project as well. Awesome. Now, once you have all this thing in place, the first thing we are going to do is we are going to change our GraphQL. In fact, before we start with GraphQL, what I will do is I will just move to my subquery project. And here we need to say npm because we need some modules here to make it work. So basically we have this package.json and we need all this content. So I will just go back here and we'll say run script. Oh, I'm just saying install. npm install and done. It is installing all the dependency modules you want in your project. And it should create a folder called node modules, and it will take some time. So by the time it is doing the installation, let's look at the package.json just to get the idea what it is getting for you. So these are the dependencies. We need to get the Polkadot APIs. We need subquery types, TypeScript module, and the client as well. And anything else? No. And these are the scripts available for us. We are going to use CodeGen for generating the mapping file and the Docker to start it on the local machine. So you can see it is downloading the modules, and you can see it is here. We got all these required modules which came here. And of course, we don't even have to look at them. And that's done. You can see we got all the modules, and now let's start editing our GraphQL. Now there are things we need here. First of all, I don't want to say starter entity. I want to say this is a transfer, and this will be an entity. What are things we have to change? ID will remain ID as it is. We are going to change this fields here. So let me remove them and let me type those things quickly. So basically we need amount as well. Amount will be of type big int. Then we need a block number which will be of type big int again. Then we need from and we need to. So both of this will be of type string. So I will say string. And that's it. So the transfer, we are basically focusing on, of course, ID will be there everywhere, but then we want amount. What amount is transferred, the block number, and from to, so the sender and receiver. And that's it. This is the entity. But then based on this particular GraphQL, I want to create a mapping file. And of course, you don't have to type that mapping file. Your tools will give it to you. So let me just clear here. Now which tool I'm talking about. So you just have to say npm and make sure that you have node and npm installed in your machine. Otherwise this will not work. And to know how we did that, you can just watch the setup video and you will get the idea. So here we'll say npm and we'll say run script. What script you are trying to run. So basically if you go back to package.json, we have this command here. Sorry, not this one. So in the package.json, you can see we have CodeGen, which we are going to use. So we'll come back here and say CodeGen, and it will create a mapping file for you, which is done. So you can see we have types in modules, and we got transfer.ts, which is matching with the GraphQL which you created. So in the GraphQL, we have ID, which is there, amount, block number, from, and to, everything is there. And we have some methods to make it work. You see we have all these methods here. Awesome. So even those things are done. And now it's time to change our project.yaml, because remember in this, we need to make sure that you only work with one particular handle, not two, not three. We are only focusing on one here. And one more check, when I faced this issue, I also mentioned that before. Basically, you should have either chain ID or you should have Genesis ID. So if you have both, Genesis hash or chain ID, delete one. Either delete chain ID or delete Genesis hash. It should work. Sometime it will have both in this network tab and it will create issues. Okay, so we want to focus only on the event. So let me do one thing. Let me remove this particular block, and I will also remove the call handle or handle call. And one thing I want to change, instead of having deposit, I will say transfer. That's it, because we want to track only transfers. So this is how you basically filter the events, because on the network, you'll be having multiple events. We are focusing only on the transfer, and that's why we have transfer here. Okay, and that's done. Let's go back, because now we are changing it here. We need to also change the TypeScript file we have. And as I mentioned before, we just need to focus only on the handle event, not on the block. Remove the block part and remove the call part. When that is deleted, okay, you can see this is a bit blurred because it is not used. So we can remove this part. Extrinsics are not going to be used. Even the block is not going to be used. So we can remove that part. And here, we don't have the entity as starter entity. We have it as transfer. In fact, logically, we should also say transfer entity. That should be a good name to our mapping file. But that's type. This should be enough. Transfer should be enough. And that's it. Just focus on this particular function and we are good. Okay, so basically we need to make some changes, right? So the save will remain save, but then let me just remove and let me retype everything. How do we handle this? Now, first of all, we want to handle all the transfers, right? All the transfer between the sender and the receiver. And for this, when you basically need to get some values from the event. So every time there's an event on the network, this is where you will get your data, this variable, event variable. So using this event variable, I can just, or not the variable, but the reference, we can get the value. So the first thing I want to get is from where you're getting this. So you can say event.data. So transfer will be the first value. So I will say this is 0. So this data will be having multiple JSON, nested JSON. So we can specify I want the first section of that. Then const2 is equal to event.event.data, and this will be 1. And then the last bit will have is the amount. So I will say amount event.event.data, and then we can say 2. Simple, right? Now, once you got this data, I also want to get hold on the transfer itself. So in this case, instead of typing it, I got a code ready with me. Again, this will be advantageous when you use the documentation. So this is how you get the hold on the transfer. So basically, we want the transfer here, and now for that transfer, you need to provide the ID as well. So in this case, you can mention this, and you will get the ID. Now, how do I know how do we get the transfer object? If you go to transfer.ts, when you want to get the object, can you see that? We have a constructor which takes the ID, and that's what we are mentioning here. So when you mention the ID, you will get the transfer object. So basically, we got the sender address, receiver address, the amount, and the transfer object as well. But then transfer object don't have a block number. We have to also add that. So we'll say transfer.block number. We have to assign this value. And again, even this value will be coming from the event.block.block.header.number.toBigInt. So basically, we need to convert that into big int because the type we have mentioned for the block number, if you can see, block number is big int, so we have to convert it into big int. Okay, so transfer object is still empty, it's just having the ID and the block number, and all this value I want to assign to the transfer object as well. So what I can do is I can say transfer dot from. This value will be coming from dot. Okay, we need to convert that into toString because we just got a constant value. The same thing can be done for 2, so I will say transfer dot 2 equal to 2.toString, and we need to also get hold on the amount. So I will say transfer dot amount, but this time it's not a string. So it will say amount dot. Basically, we need to also convert this into a type as balance. So I will say as balance, and we'll say to big int. Okay, so basically we got the hold on the transfer object, and once you have this object at the end, you can simply say save, but then that should be with the help of await. I will say transfer dot save. That's it, because all these methods are mentioned in the TypeScript file. You can see we have the save method here, which will do the stuff for us. So this is done. So every time there's an event in the network which is transfer, of course we have applied the filter, right? So this will be called, and you got the hold of the transfer. Okay, this is good. And now it's time to run this code. So before running, we have to make sure that you build this project. Now, how do you build this project? So let me just clear this here. I will say clear. Now, how do you build this? So you can use yarn or you can use npm. So I'm using npm here. So I will say run script. And to run this code, basically we need to build this code, you can simply use a build command, which is actually mentioned in the package.json. It is trying to build it, and done. There's no error. First time, when I was doing this. So finally it worked on the first instance itself. Great. Now, once it is built, it's time to run this code. So how do we run this? So before you run this code, you have to make sure that your Docker service is running. And as of now, in my machine, Docker is not running. So I will say Docker, open Docker. It will take some time to open it. Okay. It is still starting, but then how do we start? So once your Docker is started, in fact, you can also check the status, but then, okay, so my Docker just got popped up. And let me remove all the old containers here. I love to keep things clean. Now, once your Docker is up, you can simply start your Docker. And you can do that with the help of npm run script. And you can say start Docker. Again, all these commands are mentioned in the package.json. You can verify from there what command you have to use, and you have to say enter, and done. It is making sure my containers or the images are up and running. Basically downloading the images now. Again, it will take some time to download. Okay, it seems it is done. Let me just verify once. Oh, it's still downloading. It's still doing its work. So both this Subquery node and Postgres is up and running. The Graphql engine is still not running. Oh, Graphql engine is done. Pulling done, but it's not started the Graphql engine yet. Okay, even Graphql engine is started, and okay, everything looks up and running. And now how do we access it? Of course, your Docker is running, the image are running. How do we access those things? And for that, let's go to the browser and say localhost :3000. And okay, this is where you can fire the GraphQL queries. Okay, now instead of typing it here, so how do we access that? So basically we have to use GraphQL. So I want to fire the query here. Now this query is specifically designed for the transfers. So we are doing it for the transfers. And what value I want to fetch? So basically I want to fetch the first, let's say 10, and I want to order by, let's say I want to order by amount because I want to know who did the biggest transaction here, and in descending order, of course. So it will order everything, but then what data you want from the transfers. So I was in nodes, and in this you can mention what data you want. Of course, I want the ID. I want to get the amount. In fact, we have mentioned all those things there, right? I also want a block number. I also want from, and I also want to. That's it. I want all this detail. And of course, only those details we have asked our GraphQL to fetch. Now, if you got everything, just say run and it will give you the data. So you can say this is the ID and this is the amount. Since we are saying descending order of the amount, we got the biggest amount on the top here, right? And if you scroll down, the number will go down, right? So you can see we got, this is the number. I don't even know how many zeros are there. Ignore it. So yeah, that's how you do this. So we are basically trying to track all the amounts here. And if I go back to my VS Code, you can see it is still pulling all the data which is required. Cool. So that's how you run your GraphQL and you can fetch the data. So in the earlier videos, we have talked about the block. This time we have talked about the events. And I just want to know from you how much you are enjoying this Subquery Network videos. Let me know in the comment section, and also try it out. It's quite fun. Don't just watch videos, practice it. You know, every new technology will make you smarter. That's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comment section, and do subscribe for further videos. Bye-bye.